Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody.
How's it
Gene.
going, guys?
All right.
Afternoon.
Well,
Hi,
if you're
everyone.
joining, you saw the announcement on LinkedIn, of course. We're streaming live here, but of course, the episode will be available on the website and all of our platforms later after post production. But it's always fun to join live. You get to see us screw up in real time, So there you go. Anyway, so we got a great show today and great guest panelists here, which we'll get to introducing everybody in just a moment. But first things first, what's our topic today, Gene? It's quantifying credibility.
That's right, credibility. Big issue in the industry, I would say. So, yeah. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, look, we've all been in the industry a long time. So the supplement industry has relied on for decades claims and marketing narratives. I mean, it's all subjective science and definitely some marketing hype in there. That's how people try to differentiate in the market. And selective evidence, right? Whatever supports the narrative. Okay. We call that hype. And but we're entering a new phase, guys. So credibility is becoming more measurable, right? And that's what the advances of AI technology primarily here. But that's the direction we're going in. And so objective scoring, scientific benchmarking, and then transparent data-driven trust systems. So again, the gap is on what products claim, what the science supports, and what consumers actually believe, and if that's true or not.
Yeah. And, to your point, we all have been around a long time, and I've been around long enough to remember when, DSHEA was coming out, and it was going to be part of the industry, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. And it kind of set the framework. It defined what dietary ingredients were. It gave us the structure function claim. And as time went on with that, it kind of gave us a little bit more about what is adequate substantiation. Well, to some extent it did. It didn't do the greatest job at that, but it gave us some guidelines. And then even the FTC did helped out with that. And then the FDA kind of adopted some of that, but we got a better idea of what claims are all about and how to adequately substantiate them. And then you have to weigh that against, the adequate substantiation against real world credibility. And when you do that, it kind of brings us to, I guess, what this show is all about today. Are we entering an era where credibility must be quantified?
Yeah, and I think that's I think we kind of know the answer. The writing's on the wall, but I've been around almost as long as Eugene in the industry, and I remember we were doing the Centrum Herbal launch. It was in '97 and '98. It was on our way to launch that year, and it was in May of '98 that the FDA decided to come out with their structure function claim guidance. And marketing had to rewrite all their materials. So, and they didn't like it. Okay, well, people still don't like it today. It hasn't changed because it's still the same framework. But anyway, let's introduce our guest today.
Absolutely.
Really honored to have you guys all here. So I'll start up in the top left of my screen there with Tim. Tim, how about you introduce yourself here?
Well, first, it's an honor to be on here, guys. Thanks very much. I'm humbled to have this conversation today. And I'm also really happy because we're going in reverse alphabetical order because I get to go first. I'm used to going last.
Usually going last.
That means Michael gets to go last if we're going in alphabet.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, very briefly, I've been in the dietary supplement industry from the research side, since the early 90s. That's when andro and creatine were bad words. So I've been involved in projects spanning from initially sports performance and exercise science, but over the last 25 years, I've had a foot in the door of pretty much every category you can think of in the dietary supplement industry. My lab, the Center for Applied Health Sciences here in Ohio, focuses on doing clinical trials in humans to help brands substantiate their claims in a nutshell. And I've been doing that work for a long time. I've known Gene for almost as long. We were lucky to meet each other at the Arnold Classic bodybuilding show. I haven't been there in a couple of years, thankfully. but we've had a great friendship and a very collegial relationship, and so I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
All right.
And
Awesome.
let's since we're going in reverse alphabetical, we'll do Elan Sudberg. Elan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yay alphabet. I was always picked last in PE because of the last name. So maybe that's other reasons as well. But anyways, my name is Elan Sudberg. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alchemist Labs. We are a independently owned, we call ourselves the smallest medium-sized lab in the industry now. Used to be the biggest small lab, but now I think we're the smallest medium-sized. And for almost 30 years now, we've been focusing on plant and fungal ID potency and contamination testing, and are experts at that. As you probably know, one of the reasons I'm here because we're basically outspoken and have been outspoken about transparency from the lab perspective, but really pushing the industry to share the quality story. Great brands are on the shelves, but no one really knows why they're great brands other than marketing. And there's a lot of great brands doing enormous amounts of testing and really great science, but too quiet about it. So I consider myself a marketing guy with a chemistry degree and love to just talk about really sharing the quality story that really makes this industry great. And again, happy to be here. So thank you.
Very
Good
good.
to have you, man. Michael.
Yeah, hi, Gene, Bill. Fantastic being here. Appreciate the opportunity. Mike Anthonavage. I'm currently with VitaQuest, which is a contract manufacturer for vitamins and supplements. I've spent my career doing basic research from pharmaceutical level basic research through vendor pipeline management, through clinical validation, through technical marketing, through education of medicinal chemistry. So I really have, I feel like I'm kind of culminating here at VitaQuest with a great, I get to use my resume in full, which is really rewarding because it all seems worth it now.
Michael does some great formulation work. I should just add into that.
Thank you, G.
Cool. All right,
Thanks
guys.
great being here. Yep.
It's great to have all of you here. I know it took some scheduling, heroic efforts on scheduling here because of Elan, but no,
Well, you're a naughty boy.
It's true. It's true.
it's true. It's all. I told you he's a popular guy. I mean,
He is a popular guy. So,
um,
let's jump. Why don't we jump into this next segment? We're going to ask this question about what does credibility actually mean. But I think what we want to do is have each of our guests answer that sort of from their perspective in what it is that they do. So, let's start with Tim. What does credibility actually mean to you when you're thinking about evidence for dietary supplements?
Right.
What does it mean?
So I guess I could start with the end. If I think of the best brands out there with the best products, those are the ones that are substantiated with clinical trials on the article of commerce. So what they're selling in their bottle, right? So they don't rely on studies done on the ingredients in the bottle, whether those studies were done on humans or not. Hopefully they were. And on the opposite end of that spectrum would be sort of brands that are out there. They have a number of ingredients, but they haven't tested their product of commerce, what's in the actual bottle, in a human clinical trial, but they rely on animal data or in vitro data and so on. So, and it's quite interesting, right, to see some of this. Hey, this is this botanical from China or from India enhances GLP-1 secretion, which is huge right now, right? So or this is nature's Ozempic, right? All these very tenuous claims, right? And so I see a spectrum. And on the one end, like I said, a couple of finished clinical trials on the actual product. That's very strong evidence. Versus on the far end of that spectrum, unsubstantiated, but maybe novel and new ingredients that haven't been seen before. Maybe they're new applications for ingredients, but it's all based on in vitro or animal data. So in my world, I get to do a lot of the end work, right? I get brands that come to me and say, hey, we have this product. We want to run a clinical trial on it. We want to see whether it works or not. Now there are levels of that too. Some brands, they're smaller, they're startups. They don't have the money to run a full-blown placebo-controlled randomized double-blind study. So they want to sort of dip their toe in the pool before they cannonball in the deep end, right? And so they want to do a pilot study or they want to do an open label study. And we've done those as well. But typically, I like to see brands that commit to doing more than one study on more than one product, right? That's the world that I live in.
Right. And would you have any comment on sort of, the difference between like a randomized control trial and, so-called real world evidence?
Yeah, the real world evidence, that's where the marketers, can dazzle you with bullshit sometimes, right?
Yep.
They can say, 80% of the people polled that used our product said that it helped them sleep better at night, right? Well, there's no way to sort of validate that. That can be, well, in the worst case, it can be made up, completely fabricated. But let's say it isn't. It's, it is data that the company collected from consumers that have used their products. And testimonials, let's be honest, guys, we know
that's
this.
That's anecdotal evidence, right? That's
It's
not
anecdotal,
really.
but that helps sell products. And like if you see customer claims on a website, strong claims from so and so who lives in South Carolina, and the first name and the last initial or whatever, people believe those kinds of things. And
And those of us in the industry know a lot of times there are people who are paid to go on and put reviews and put this stuff, and that's why at the end of the day it really comes back to doing what it is that Tim does. If you want to validate your product claims properly,
and honestly, it's not without its risk. I mean, good science costs money and it takes time to do. And you do one study and maybe you get a positive result in the sponsor's eyes, and then you do another follow-up study, at a different lab in a different cohort of people, and you don't get the same result. And why is that? Well, think about it. Like, not every diet works for everybody all the time. Not every exercise program works for everybody all the time. Not every drug works for everybody all the time. So there are differences, differences between men and women, and differences between people of different ethnic backgrounds at the genetic level that can potentially affect your results for a trial. So it's really the collection, the body of evidence, right, that helps determine whether or not a product or an ingredient is credible.
Yeah. Very good, thanks, Tim. Hey, Elan, why don't you go next? Tell us about what credibility means from your perspective, thinking about ingredient identity, purity, adulteration, all of that kind of thing.
Sure. So I like to say that I identify as a marketing guy with a chemistry degree. And so I love the marketing of this industry. I've always appreciated the commercials, but I like to look at the data behind it, similarly to Tim. So for me, really from the lab perspective is, sure, you said the identity passed, the contamination passed, the purity passed, but why not share the results? This industry spends millions and millions and millions on testing, and only a fraction of that spend is shared at the consumer level. And I asked the question why, and I've been doing that for almost 30 years now. And so my perspective is that if you did the testing and you did it the right way, with the right labs, why wouldn't you share it? Why wouldn't you share it with the consumer level and at every single level that you have access to? To me, it's a marketing goldmine unspent. And so to the credibility is, do you have the right material? It doesn't have the things in it that you say it should have. And then, of course, is it free from harmful contaminants? So, cool, you've got ginger on your label, but what's the gingerol content? Just as one example. It gets more complicated the more complicated the product is. So if you have a simple raw material, just ginger, that's as easy as it gets. But the moment you put that raw material into other ingredients or along with other ingredients, that method really does not work anymore, or may not work anymore. And brands need to spend the extra effort to prove that their product is what they say it is, but not deploying stock standard methods that they used on the original raw materials. So to me, it's a complicated answer. Credibility means doing what's really necessary to prove what's on the label is actually in that bottle.
And I want to take a moment just to comment on that adulteration part. When we think of adulteration, we oftentimes think of something that's bad that got into it, but it's not just that. It's trying to fool people.
Sure.
Let's say, for example, you had a phytomelatonin material Okay. And let's say you said, hey, it's all natural. It's from a plant source. Okay.
Right.
And then, but we also know that there is synthetic melatonin out there. How do we know if that material that's used in that product is actually a pure phytomelatonin plant material, or they've spiked it, they've adulterated it with a synthetic melatonin? That's when you go to Elan and you say, okay, I want to do the testing here. Maybe I want to be Alchemist assured. Maybe I want to understand, be able to demonstrate that 100% of my materials are plant-based bio is specifically from the source. And now you can prove what it is that your marketing claims are making. And so that's one of the things I like about what Elan has to offer.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You remember the protein spiking that went on?
Oh my goodness!
Years ago,
yeah.
Claimed more, protein was determined by nitrogen content, and
when add more nitrogen.
You took a deep dive under the hood, and companies were adding glycine or some other amino acid has no role.
The method matters.
Right.
The method really does
absolutely.
Matter, right? It really does.
Hot rocks back in the 80s or 90s. I don't know if you're not hot rocks. What was it? It was being spiked with Dianabol. Actually, it was a sports nutrition product that actually had, and people were getting crazy gains, and it just was unexplainable by the
sure
science.
They were.
And and it was actually spiked with anabolic steroids. Believe it or not.
That's crazy.
So
I remember.
And then when the second version came out, then it didn't have it in it anymore, and then it didn't work as good, and everybody wondered why.
Go figure. Bill.
Yeah, there's a more recent example of my own experience, just like 3 years ago. Okay, where the method is, and we did a show on this on validating test methods and all that. We still have challenges with that, don't we, Elan? Right? We still have people using the method, whatever, or USP method, whatever. So I think we all recognize, and this was with a former company of mine and a European group that sent off KSM 66 ashwagandha to one of our labs that was approved labs and used the USP method, and then showed it contained no withanolides. Well, first of all, I happen to know that it's a proprietary extract, and you have to use their approved labs and their method to do it.
Right.
Because that's my area, PhD chemistry. So, even it's not just the consumers, it's not just the companies, even the scientists and the people who are supposed to be in the know don't even understand that concept. That's how bad it is sometimes. And so when we sent it, of course, to the approved labs, there was one in Europe.
Okay.
And the French don't like being told they're wrong. So,
well,
Michael.
So Michael, I would like to hear you talk about. I mentioned you do formulation. I'd like to hear you talk about what credibility is, kind of from a formulation standpoint, thinking about things like making label claims, versus functional outcomes. How do you put something together? How do you make this credible? I'm sure you've looked at a lot of products and said, "Oh my gosh, that's just a load of crap." That product. How do you not formulate something that is a load of crap? Make it credible.
So VitaQuest is a contract manufacturer, right? So we don't have our own white label. We don't have our own brand. So I get the opportunity, especially from an innovation standpoint, to have customers come in and say, hey, I want to be in this space and I want to be different. I want to differentiate. And they go, I want. And then I start asking questions. Well, how does it look in your mind? Like, let's start with the finished product on the shelf. What's it going to say? Right. And then we reverse engineer it backwards. So credibility, by definition, is just substantiating what you say. Right. It's kind of like for the Geek Squad out there, it's like it's ISO certified. Right. You do what you say and you say what you do. So sounds easy enough. And to Tim and Elan's point, there are plenty of potholes in the road along the way. But I'm a cook, right? As a manufacturer, I cook. So what we need to do is make sure we're cooking with the best ingredients. So what happens is price point usually dictates how many of those quality ingredients I use. or how many of those quality ingredients I get to substitute out for commodity ingredients or branded ingredients for commodity ingredients. That's where you start to slide on the credibility slope, right? Because I started with this dream of saying X, Y, and Z on claims, and now I have a path there, and now my brands can't facilitate that path for whatever reason. It's usually price, but sometimes it's technical feasibility. Sometimes these ingredients aren't compatible with each other. Sometimes your branded ingredients, although clinically studied at that particular dose, it's only half the story sometimes. And I think we'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but when you merge product claims, scientific support, and consumer belief, that overlapping zone of all three of those spheres really results in real world credibility. So what do you get? We look for compliance in terms of the clinical studies being done, because as Tim, you said, you can run a clinical study and have a lot of different outcomes depending on where you want to put your eggs. Reason to believe that if the customer says that this heart supplement is going to make my blood pressure go down, will it? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? Will it? And then the clinical studies say, well, it went down 2 points on my diastolic and 3 points on my systolic. Is that even consumer perceivable? Right? So if the consumer doesn't perceive that the formula that we make does what it says it does, it's going to be a one-time buy. So I believe credibility is almost supported by loyalty, right? So you see these brands that produce product, that produce results, which produce recurrent revenue, right? That's from a capitalistic standpoint. From a manufacturing standpoint, there's claims. How should I say this? Knowing how to handle the ingredients. We work with a lot of probiotics, and I got to tell you, they come in refrigerated. And if you don't temper them and bring them to room temperature before you start processing them, you're already starting off substandard, right?
Yeah,
and
okay.
Everything needs to test out for the shelf life of the product, and that's I think what's really pushing credibility in our industry these days is because now you have NSF, now you have USP, you have all these elevated levels of reassurance that my product has and performs the way it says it is. Using standardized ingredients, massively important, right? Because to your point, if I'm using ginger, is it standardized to gingerols, which is the active ingredient that's actually being studied for the claim that's being set? So it's really important to cook with good ingredients. It's good to label your menu with transparency, because we're talking about scientific claims, but there's a lot of brands out there that says they're eco-friendly, they're recycled, they're regenerative recycle, they're organic, they're this, they're that. And then when you get into the minutia of it, and we know this because we have a whole regulatory department that actually spends many hours reviewing the details behind formulations to make sure that are those excipients allergies? Do they have low amounts of allergies in them? Right. So there's a lot of ways to fall down if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's. So I think everything that Tim and Elan said, absolutely true. I just have to make sure that all that's in order in my toolbox before I go to work.
Thank you. And I wanted to comment on something here. It's not a mistake, guys, out there, those of you who are listening, that these three particular guests are on here representing their specific areas. I can tell you, I won't speak for Bill, but I can tell you that I personally have worked with each one of these gentlemen, and I've done a number of studies before with Tim and his CRO. We've worked very closely with Elan on raw materials that we are producing at Nutriland USA. And I've worked with Michael and VitaQuest before on products that I have formulated for various clients and customers over the years. And I feel that each of these gentlemen and their respective organizations are the gold standard or at the top of the pile here. So we wanted the best when we talked about this. So again, thank you for the comments regarding credibility. So Bill, you want to take the next section here?
Sure, man. And I think as we lead into the next section, let's think about this. Here's a key provocative question. Can a product be compliant but not credible? So I think we all know the answer to that.
Yes, you can.
It can.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Yes,
it
100%.
could be totally compliant per regs,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean it's credible. I mean, look, there's tons of commodity products out there, and it has it on the label, and it has supposedly the right dosage or whatever, but of a particular bioactive. But how do you know, right, that it's actually credible, which means it doesn't work? Well, that's kind of leads into our next section, which is the building blocks blocks of quantifiable credibility, right? So what are those? So let me just name them off, and then we'll just kind of have a roundtable discussion about it. But identity, first of all, this has been an issue with botanicals for decades, right? It's a constant problem with that. Less, I'd say today, more than the past. I'd say even pre-Deshay, it was a pretty chronic problem. Purity, right? What does that really mean? Dose, of course, is really important in terms of whatever was clinically studied there. Bioavailability, and again, with all the talk about where microbiome research is going and the GI and what really gets absorbed in the gut, or the critics of our industry that say we're just making expensive urine, right? So where's the bioavailability piece of this? Clinical evidence, of course, Tim knows I can talk ad infinitum about that, and manufacturing quality, right? So again, people, Michael, don't understand, overages and label claims and losses, and these things all have to be factored in. And a lot of brands don't, in my experience, even big ones that I work with, didn't understand that concept in terms of that. And so, again, they're driven by cost primarily, unfortunately, many times, and that restricts what you can do. And then, of course, you already mentioned dosage formats. There's only so much you can put in a gummy. And remember, you're heating up, you're making candy, right? So you think that's good for all bioactives? Probably not. Sorry, I'm not a fan of gummies, guys. I think gummies are a joke. But anyway, so here's some questions to think about. We can kind of, whoever wants to take it. So of all these pillars, which ones do you think matter the most today? Whoever wants to jump in there.
Well, I'll jump in first. I always like to say that identity is the first phase of GMPs. Like, why bother checking for lead and arsenic if you have the wrong raw material? Right. Obviously, presence of lead and arsenic in the right material is also a really big issue. But like Gene said, identity has been an issue with this industry for a long, long time. I'll share and testify that my 30 years is getting better every single day. We fail less material than we used to, but now it's just different. Different materials are failing for different reasons than they used to. But identity to me is one of the first issues of this industry. We get that down. Next phase to me would be all the other ones, the potency, the purity. So is it going to do what you say or what it's supposed to do, which then goes into Tim's field, and then the purity, is it containing lead, arsenic, salmonella, those types of things. Obviously, each are really critical, but I wouldn't spend money on testing salmonella before you make sure you have the right material in the first place.
Yeah, I'm the last.
Garbage.
Yeah, right. Really, clinical trial should be the last step, because if you don't have any of the ones prior to that, the purity, potency, and so on, bioavailability, and all, we have no business running a clinical trial, right? That would be extremely unwise. When we run clinical trials, most institutional review board approvals, IRBs, right? They require a certificate of analysis that says, hey, here's what we're going to test, and here's the specific lot that we're testing it in. So this isn't, a C of A from a lot that's 2 years old, and we're running a study on a new batch, right? Because some brands want to do that. They want to make sure they give you new material. Well, we need a certificate of analysis on the material that we're testing. And then we always retain a number of samples from that study, half a dozen bottles or so, on our shelves, so that if there's any question post hoc, we can send it out to our own independent third-party lab for follow-up C of A testing. So it's critical because, a lot of times a sponsor think it's a slam dunk. We're going to run this trial. We're going to get these claims. We're going to be able to substantiate everything the marketing team wants to do. And if the trial falls on its head and it doesn't work, then we did something wrong. Somehow, the lab did something wrong, or our methods were sloppy or whatever. Let's not forget we're dealing with human subjects. They're not rats in a cage who can feed them when you want, light and dark cycles when you want, exercise them when you want, and so on. So, but anyway, everything that Elan just said, and Michael too, all that stuff has to come prior to a clinical trial. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Tim, and it's just on clinical research in general. And I pulled stats from PubMed, and I've written an article about this. And you can see over the last several decades that it's kind of an exponential growth curve of the more and more research being done on supplements. And but there's another layer to this that we don't talk about, and this is something we're going to tease out with NutriSelect as we start building the engine and feeding data into that platform. And that is, if you just take the clinical research, human clinical data that's out there, certain percent, if you think of the industry as a whole, all of that research is skewed in some way. This is kind of my professional opinion of this, or way I see it, because it was driven by a consumer trend, or it was driven by marketing departments and brands, maybe not necessarily by science. That doesn't always get the lead, right? So that means all the data that's out there has some sort of, it's not normalized in terms of the results, right? And on top of that, how many of those studies were actually thrown together and, to your point, didn't have all the right bells and check boxes done before they actually conducted the study, because they were just trying to leverage a claim or something like that. So what's your feeling on that? I've always been, I don't think we know the number. I've never seen any metrics, but what do you think after all your experience? What does that look like?
That's a great observation. When I was still at the university as a college professor, there was a big emphasis for not just running a study for a sponsor to help them substantiate their claims, which are typically consumer-facing outcomes, right? Some real-world stuff that people can see or feel or whatever. But as scientists, you want to know why. So you want to know, well, what are the mechanisms behind these benefits, right? And it's been a ding that, and maybe it's a fair criticism of most of the supplement studies that are out there, because they often don't go there, right? And they don't go there because it's very expensive to do mechanism of action claim work. And moreover, it's even tougher to do it in a human, right? So you tend to sort of pair up your consumer-oriented supplement study outcomes with maybe relying on some mechanisms of action from previous studies that have been done in other models. But if you're a company, let's say you own your own brand, and why would you want to fund a study, $1 million study on the mechanism of action of melatonin, for example, in a human brain? Right? Hasn't that been studied before? And don't we know pretty much, not that we couldn't find something novel and new and it would be really great and take us into new areas, but that's what science is all about. But you get where I'm going here, right? So it's an astute observation, and yes, it is a limitation of even the work that we do in my lab, that we don't get the chance to really drill down on potential mechanisms of action. So we often speculate on the potential mechanisms of action based on the existing scientific literature.
Sure.
Yeah.
And even I remember back in the early days when, after Deshay, we were really looking at claim substantiation and working with some of the regulatory lawyers, there was a whole discussion like, okay, we can use animal studies to substantiate mechanism of action, not to substantiate claims for structure function claims in humans, what it's going to do for them, but you could do that. And so it's still one of those things that is often done. But to your point, Tim, it's expensive and difficult sometimes to do that.
Well, even drugs don't do it. Okay, so listen, it's not just supplements. Okay, so they're a little bit on the high side.
You can open the PDR. You can open the PDR, and you can look. And still today, less than it used to be. Mechanism of action not known. but thought to be,
Right.
or
Exactly. Michael, in terms of these pillars, from your perspective, what do you? I think you're probably going to relate with what Elan said, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I could give you. I'm going to go back to my cooking example. I can hand out the recipe to my mom's, tomato sauce, right, and hand it
Right.
to everybody on this call. The ingredients are listed there. Tells you how to make it, and then we're all going to bring the tomato sauce to a party. We're going to blind the pots, and then we're going to have a taste test contest, and someone's
I
going to
love
win.
that.
Someone's going to win. Why
Yeah,
is
they're
that?
not all. They're. Yeah, I know. They're not all going to be the same. I'm a chef, right? I have my own recipe book. I've been cooking for years. People come to my house and I prepare these dishes, and then people have them. They go, "Oh my, this is incredible! Can I have the recipe?" And they say, "Sure." And they go home and they try to make it themselves, and they can't figure out why it doesn't taste like mine. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
because there's an art to it. Okay,
There's an art to it.
there's an art.
Formulation is an art. Building things is an art, right? So
Yeah.
so once I have a solid ingredient that I trust, that I understand its pharmacokinetics. I know that's not a word that we really can use in this industry, but you got to understand that, because that's what bioavailability is, right? Not just getting it into my body, but does it go where it needs to go, and does it stick around long enough to do anything? Right? We talk about nitric oxide like it's a statue that sits somewhere in my body and does something, right? This stuff is so labile and disappears so fast, and I show people absorption curves for the most part, and I'm generalizing here, but most things stay in your body 4 to 6 hours at effective concentrations, and then they're just kind of gone, right? Good
Yeah.
news, right? Because you got organs that evolved thousands of years to get rid of things on purpose because they don't want them to stick around too long. But
Right.
I digress. The thing that happens is once you've got a good recipe, now you have to have good equipment. There's nothing worse to an omelet than cooking it on some $10 frying pan and trying to flip it. You can't do it, right? Or you got to use a pound of butter or a gallon of oil. So when we get ingredients in here, we have to blend them. And then what happens is our formulators will sit down at a bench and do something in a bag and say, all right, it looks like it's going to work. Then we go to pilot and we go bigger, bigger, bigger. And next thing you know it, I'm in a 40,000 kg blender where there's shear pressure and an engine to move these things. And now these ingredients, which I knew what they were when they went in there, sometimes start their stability journey degradation right there, right in my
Yeah.
blender.
Right.
So it's got to test out at the end of the day. At the end of the day, what I make has to test out. Why wouldn't it test out? Well, there's 100 reasons why it won't test out, but that's the art of building a formula. That's the art of manufacturing up to production scale. So I think it all comes together. It's really you can't tell an artist what colors to use to paint, right? All you can do is look at the painting when they're done, and you can say it's good or it's bad or it looked like someone else's painting. Listen, we get customers all the time asking us to make a formula from an old recipe that they had, and they expect it to pass under new regulations, and it just doesn't do it. So we have to add in overage, we have to add in excipients to help it flow through machines, and all these things have a ultimate effect on the product. And the funny thing is, what we're not talking about here is the aesthetics. Taste.
Right.
Taste. You know how many times I have to iterate for taste, right? So if it's supposed to taste like pineapple from my last lot and it doesn't taste like pineapple this time around, then the consumer hotline lights up, and now people are saying, what's going on with your pineapple hydration drink? And we're like, well, nothing's different, right? Oh, but it is. The manufacturer of that pineapple flavor is using a new lot, and they're using new raws, and all of a sudden it looks the same on the C of A, but it's really like a different mesh size, or it's a different this, or it's a different that. So this is why companies have so many different departments who specialize in certain things, because it's almost impossible for one or two people to actually monitor all of these possible outcomes, until, and we're going to probably talk about it, until AI comes on board,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
that's a good segue. I'm just conscious of our time here, guys, and let's jump into uh,
The
you know,
scientific benchmarks.
yeah. Let's quickly go through that and then get into the AI scoring systems after that. If you want to
Yeah.
take the next one, Gene.
Sure. So on scientific benchmarks, so Tim, from the clinical research standpoint, you know, looking at benchmarks, are we ready? So what are some of the standardizing endpoints, biomarkers? What are things you're looking for?
Yeah,
What do we have in terms of variability in
yeah. I
clinical
think
trial
you can.
quality?
Right, you can go from very general to very specific, right? So in general, whenever you do a supplement study that's longer than just a single dose study, where you might be looking at pharmacokinetics and bioavailability, in that case, you'd be measuring just simple vital signs, right? Heart rate, blood pressure, so on, maybe GI tolerance and that kind of thing. Maybe some visual analog scales for changes in cognition, but that's a single dose study. Anything chronic or even subchronic, and by subchronic, I mean maybe 30 days. That's a typical target for a lot of brands because that's a 1 month supply. A lot of products are delivered in a bottle that provide a 1 month supply, and consumer wants to know what's going to happen if I take one of these bottles. Should I buy it again? So in that case, a general panel would be a lipid panel, so your cholesterol and the cholesterol profiles, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, and so on. You do a basic metabolic panel, so you'd get glucose, electrolytes, liver, kidney enzymes, that sort of thing. And then maybe a CBC, a complete blood count, right, to see what's going on with the white cells and the subfractions of the white cells and the red cells and so on. But it really depends on the product, right? I mean, I think an endpoint should make sense from the standpoint of what's the product claim, what's the claim. I go back to the Ozempic thing, and it's interesting. But remember, the studies initially said, oh, you lose 20, 30 X% of weight in a certain amount of time. And we found out that, a fair majority of that weight was actually lean mass, right? Which isn't a good thing because that's one of the main drivers of your metabolic rate is lean mass and so on. But that was sort of not really covered by the early pharma trials because they didn't measure body composition. They didn't measure fat mass and lean mass and bone mass. They just measured body weight. So it needs to make sense. You need to drill a little deeper. But it all depends on the claims you want to make, right? If you're doing a product that can help manage blood pressure within the normal range or manage blood sugar within the normal range, then that's what you need to measure, right? So.
Very
But
good.
the good thing, Tim, what came out of that is that the world didn't even know what the word sarcopenia meant,
Yeah.
right? It didn't know what PCAS meant. It didn't. People didn't understand these things. So I think
Right.
it's an evolution of knowledge.
Well, it was a no-brainer for us, right? We're like, wait a minute. So you're not eating, so you're hypocaloric, severely hypocaloric because your appetite's been shut off. Okay, there may be other mechanisms there, at least with the dual and tri analogs now, right? But let's say early on, you just don't eat as much. So now you're hypocaloric and you're probably micronutrient deficient, right? So, and we know immediately from fasting studies that your daily protein requirements go up. So why weren't these trials done where people were given more protein from the very beginning to help retain more lean mass as they lost weight, right?
Right.
So now it's like, okay, let's do the studies where you put people on a GLP-1 analog or a dual analog. You feed them a high protein diet and you give them some kind of exercise to maintain their lean mass. That's the ideal scenario, right? But that wasn't done early on.
No.
Very good. Thanks. So, Elan, so from your perspective, what are, talk about standardization and testing methods, maybe some variabilities that you see across labs?
Yeah, so I have a conflicted perspective on this since I was raised by an herbalist and an acupuncturist and a chiropractor who had his line of tinctures. My father, our founder, he was a chemist before all that, and then went into to natural medicine, and then we opened the lab. So his perspective, and this is what was drilled into me, is it's really the synergistic effect of all of these compounds in plants or mushrooms that work together to produce the desired thing that you're looking for. Now, obviously, there's certain plants and mushrooms that have really strong single components, psilocybin, cannabinoids, opioids. But for the most part, it's a lot of things. It's not just the gingerol; it's the gingerol and friends, and that's more of a philosophy. That's not me saying that I'm not for standardized extracts. I think that there's an absolute place for that as well, because we have, through research, figured out that it's that guy. So let's have more of that guy in our products. Where I'm going with this is that the standardization is challenging, because today we don't just see powders and capsules or alcohol extracts reduced to a dry material powder in a capsule. We see nanoparticle lipospheric multi-capsule gummies with gingerol. And like, now what do? Right? I can test your ginger raw material. I can test your gingerol raw material, but there is no method for that nanoparticle lipospheric multi-capsule gummy. And the better part of the industry does not get that method does not work on your crazy product. And so a lot of times, because of price, and I'm not sorry that we're open for business and can develop methods for you, but most times people just throw the stock standard gingerol method on that product, get a number. Hopefully it's within the range of what's on the bottle, and move forward. Well, guess what? That's not right. And the FDA is aware that matrix interference is a thing. All these other system suitability, basically making sure the method is fit for purpose for that product, is, for the most part, not being done often enough on these finished products, which, in my perspective, leaves a gap for exploitation of this narrative that we're untested, unregulated, and unsafe. And those are all false narratives in our industry. We are regulated. We are one of the safest of all FDA-regulated industries. And we are tested. So to me, the gap of understanding and accepting the fact that the method for ginger is not going to work on your crazy product is something that we need to get this industry to realize and accept.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. And then, Michael, so maybe address consistency in manufacturing and formulation, sort of batch to batch.
Reproducibility.
Yeah. There you go.
Everything has to be reproducible at scale. So in order for me to feel good about that, to predict reproducibility, because that's what I have to do actually to make it work, is that all the subcomponents need to be validated, verified, filed, checked against compliancy, checked against regulation, right? So compliance gets you on the shelf. Credibility keeps you there, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that can get on the shelf. Right, it's the ones that don't stay on a shelf for lack of credibility are the ones, right? So did the clinical studies, were they performed at a credible third-party laboratory that the producer of the material didn't fund, right? You know, there's a lot of conflict of interest that we tend to sweep under the rug a lot, right? That's why we don't have a brand, right? That keeps us objective. And that allows us to fill our toolbox with the best ingredients and the best processes. So it's really about process, reproducibility, and understanding the nuances of keeping your product on the shelf for the 2 years. To your point, we are very well regulated, and it shocks me to listen to the social media slop that we're not. And it's really those folks out there that kind of give us a bad name.
Very good.
If I could jump in real quick on Twitter, Michael was saying, the FDA gave us this gift called GMPs. They said, you got to test your stuff. They didn't really say much more than that. They said, use scientifically valid methods, not validated, not fit for purpose. So you can take your plunger, throw it in your drum of complicated powders of botanicals, and if it gives you the cool graph that it gave you last time, good to go, proceed, press the green button in your conveyor belt and put that product on the shelf. Well, that's garbage. Yep. That is absolute garbage. And the FDA, unfortunately, is slightly underfunded, can't do exactly all the work they need to do to say, hey, was that method actually fit for purpose? Was your matrix qualification done for this complicated thing? And unfortunately, for a large part of the industry, that's not being done. So it really relies on this ignorance is bliss kind of thing, and waiting for the police officer at the stop sign to catch the ones not stopping.
Yeah, and you don't want to be the accident that changes the road rules.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
So let's jump into the next section. Bill, you want to run with that one?
Yeah, let's jump into where this is kind of where we are today and what we're dealing with the given the tools and knowledge that we have today. But what I want to jump into is which leads us right into the future of the industry, is where technology is going to take us. Okay, so and of course everybody knows that what I'm doing now in terms of leading with NutriSelect, and the plan is to really advance evidence-based supplementation, which I think we all want. But we're going against the tide of an industry that's operated, same old, SSDD, right? The same way every day. And of course that has to change, and consumers want that. That's the other thing too. It's important to acknowledge that consumers are getting more sophisticated, and they're questioning things that they didn't used to question about it. Okay. And of course, some of that rhetoric about not regulating all that comes from those people who've had a bad experience. Okay. So how do we leverage this technology that's absolutely coming? It's going to transform every industry. This is not like flash in the pan social media cool videos you can produce. Okay, this is like serious stuff, guys. Okay, we're talking millions and millions and billions being invested into infrastructure to advance this technology, and how that's going to change each industry. So in this case, let's talk about how from each of you guys, from your perspective, I think what I want to know is, from your perspective, how is AI going to change your area? Okay, because that's going to dictate and roadmap us of where we're going to go overall, which hopefully will be in the same endpoint for everybody. So Tim, so from the clinical evidence piece of this, how is AI going to help or transform that piece for us, in your opinion?
Right. So on my end, I'm already using AI. I've been using it for a couple of years now, and I use all of them, and I make them fight each other, because I'll cut and paste responses from one into the other and say,
Oh yeah, multimodal, man, that's the way to
summarize
go.
the response and tell me whether it's correct or not, and provide suggestions if it isn't, and so on. And so, as you guys know, the better the prompt, the better the answer.
Right.
But yeah, on my end, I've been using it to help me design clinical trials, come up with novel endpoints, because staying on top of the scientific literature, and that's the other way I've used it, is to stay on top of all the emerging scientific literature that comes out, the voluminous amount of data that we have now available, right? It's just impossible to read. Like, that's what I do, guys, and I've been doing it since grad school. I get up and I read papers, I read science stuff. I love reading. That's what I do.
Yeah.
One of my friends said, "When's the last time you read a book just for leisure?" I couldn't tell you. I really, honestly couldn't. I'm a little embarrassed, actually, but because I just read scientific related stuff. But I'm a big history buff, so that would probably be the first one that I would read. So I think in terms of AI for me, and in the clinical end, very succinctly, it's helping stay up to date on the new scientific discoveries that are out there.
Yeah.
Maybe up to date on new ingredients, up to date on new ways to design studies for maximum safety and efficacy, and new endpoints that might be of interest to potential sponsors.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of that, and when you're talking about helping, and when we say AI, people immediately think ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or something like that, but it's so much more than that in terms of, LLMs or whatever. Those have been around for decades in terms of that. But now the technology's gotten fast enough that we can look at, none of us scientists here in this room can actually, if there's 11,000 published studies in omega-3 fatty acids, do you think we can read all those and collate all that data and identify the gaps and new endpoints? No, impossible. So that's how we leverage that knowledge that's already out there, and we can set up filters to filter out, oh, that was a bad study because it didn't have the right material, whatever. We can train the LLM on the back end, and that's what we're doing with NutriSelect. And as we get an N score, which is kind of, think of it as an efficacy certification, it's not just clinical, but it's looking at a number of parameters. We'll be able to identify gaps that no human could identify by collating all that data in real time like that. To me, that's exciting. And that moves us from that area of everything is subjective to more of an objective basis, right? Where we're really looking objectively at it, because even the FTC comes out and says, "Oh, you need 2 clinical studies, double-blind placebo." That's totally subjective, guys. Is that based on science? No, absolutely not. Um, and so, so Elon, for you then, can we take testing data and standardize that into scoring? Well, I think we can because it's more mathematical. Yes and no. It depends on
Yep.
what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's complicated because of that lipospheric nanoparticle, blah, 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 because there's no standardized.
Right.
But the existence of such and the transparency of such gives a point in that category. And so, we at Alchemist, our mission is to basically improve global access to safe and effective natural medicine. So we don't make a product. We basically help our clients make great products. And we are transparent top to bottom. So we're one of the few labs that give away all the data. So to me, with that perpetuation of transparency coupled with NutriSelect, I think this is happening, but it happened a lot faster during the pandemic, that consumers are trying to know more. That knowing is up. The whole idea of understanding what you're taking and why. We're all trying to be Tim and understand what is the biological method that makes this thing work. And so I think with that, consumers having that hunger for understanding more about the product they're taking, products like NutriSelect really gives them the ability to choose which product over another. We help out, we kind of play rhythm guitar in this industry. We're not the lead singers. We're in the background playing, keeping the rhythm of quality, and are basically donating our transparency to this cause in the name of the consumers having access to safe, effective natural medicines. So the labs don't really place like a direct role in this type of thing, but we are beyond pleased to see this level of access to data that gives the consumers a better option to know what to buy rather than listening to some non-health professional spout nonsense online. An influencer. I hate that word so much. I don't take medical advice from Hollywood or someone being paid to talk about the thing, or doctors, but medical doctors, I should say.
Content creators. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, content creators. Yeah. I mean, cool. Great. Thank you for helping us get confused. But products like what we're talking about, NutriSelect, really give people the data they need rather than your flat abs. It's like moving on.
Yeah. Actually, I want to come back to something you said earlier because I was surprised by it. And that is, there are a lot of companies that do testing but don't talk about it. Why is that? What do you think?
When I asked I know why. This is 2 reasons. Maybe 3. They are slow to make change in the paradigm of testing. Has been, that's something for the QA person to worry about. The test goes in the drawer and never seen again. So that's the old way of doing things. 2 other reasons. The other one is because, which I've heard and I call bullshit, that they don't want to share what amazing lab they're using so that everyone else goes to that amazing lab and turnaround slows down, or some version of that. Like the restaurant that you love gets too busy. The last one, which is probably more of the case, is that they're not using a reputable lab. So occasionally we'll lose a client. I'm going to go to lab XYZ because you guys are too expensive. And I challenged them. I said, go on LinkedIn right now, state your company, your name, and what lab you're going to use, and see what happens. And if you can't do that proudly, if you can't proudly share what lab you're using, you need to find a new lab. And so that's my answer to the third one is they're probably not exactly excited about the discount, cheap, non-specialized lab. The big box retailer does every single test in the world, whether it's lead pipes, tanning supplies, and chamomile. That's not a specialist. And so they're probably not proud of what lab they use. And that's my suspicion.
I'd say that's probably true. And that's because we still, even though we're evolving, and this is just kind of my view as well, which I think dovetails to what you're saying, but the evidence is there. There's more and more research being done and consequently more testing. However, have we really moved the needle from subjective marketing hype and influencer mindsets as a culture? No, we haven't really moved the needle that much.
No.
And so it's going to take something. Unfortunately, because people are more reactive than proactive, right? So again, that's my vision for NutriSelect, is to change that for the consumers where they can be proactive, and that's going to change. Hit them where the pocketbook is. Change the buying habits, and guess what? Oh shit! I'm going to have to go do this now. Right?
The consumers will choose which ones are more reputable brands, more trustworthy brands based on the data they share.
Now, and I want to ask Michael, because Michael, as a fellow formulator, how do you use AI, or does AI influence any of your formulation decisions?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the Wright brothers got in the air, called it an airplane, and from that point on, here we are, right? We got the space shuttle, we got Mach 10, right? We can fly this speed of sound over and over and over again. So of course we're going to use AI. We use multiple versions of AI. We have an enterprise AI here that we use, so we only teach ourselves, keeping our knowledge base kind of secure. Because when you use public AI, obviously you teach the world, right? So if there's some advantage to be had in learning, then you kind of want to keep that to what you're offering is, right? So with that being said, I'll say that from an earlier point, as a teacher, as a scientist, reading papers my whole life, you'll never read all the papers. And the funny thing is, when you read some of these papers for the actual purpose that they were written, you start to think, I wonder if I applied that same concept of Y to X, will I find out something new about X, right? That's the cool part about reading papers, right? You're educating yourself, but it's on a very linear perspective. And that's how we teach in education. That's how we teach in universities. This is how we learn A plus B equals C. Now, everybody's a systems expert. I know AI can take the field of chemistry and mash it together with physics and mash it together with pharmacokinetics and get a whole brand new mechanism hypothesis out there that I could test. So that's really cool. So how do I use it? I use it to help search my toolbox for the best ingredients, right? It only gives me the ingredient list. To our earlier point, I have to have a human being cook it up to put it together. So you get this huge aggregate of information from AI, which gives you the best possibilities, either by price, by dose, by compatibility, by safety profile. You can ask AI to rank all things. But the funny thing is when you ask AI to start ranking things, or you start developing a ranking system, AI starts choosing things that have the most data. Not the most relevant data, but data, like quantity, right? So KSM 66 going to be on top all the time, right? All the time.
Theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically.
Well, no, I'd say theoretically, but we're going to find out, right? You would assume that as we're training our platform, if I only took their 70 plus clinical trials and all their data and plugged it in, and that's all we looked at for ashwagandha, that would skew the algorithm. That would give it bias. So it has to be balanced in terms of all information out there, good, bad, or whatever it is, because that's how you're going to have to, it's going to learn to do that. And again, it's the beauty of the technology. It will enable us to do that. So look, guys,
aggregation isn't interpretation, right?
No.
Just because you got a big record collection doesn't make you a music expert.
No, it still takes the human in the machine on that one in terms of hey, does that result actually make sense, right? And then testing it and retesting it until it gives you the same answer repeatedly, and then it's robust. Then you can safely say, okay, at this stage, given the data I have today, up to today, this is accurate, right? Now, is it going to be 100%? Well, look, wearable devices, right? The technology is really advanced. It's not 100%, right? And I think that's important to know that in everything we've talked about today, nothing is 100%. There isn't 100% of anything, right? And but again, I think that's the simplification of our mainstream media and everything wants to make it simple, black and white, 8th grade. Okay, it's either this or that, and it's not. That's not. That's one of the things that I learned getting my PhD. I don't know about you guys. For me, it was like I used to think that way until I got into it and found out how gray it was. Okay, so what we're talking about is teasing out the gray areas here with the technology and making that more black and white, right? Which I do believe is possible. So look, guys, we're coming up towards the end here. Let's talk about the future, and I'd love to hear from everybody of where we're going as an industry and how this technology. I have my own thoughts about that. I won't bias that, but I want to hear it from you guys. Just kind of rapid fire. What do you think what is trust going to look like in 2030, right? What are consumers going to be looking for? And whoever wants to start, go around and we'll
I'm going to start because When I was at Natural Products Expo West, and I was on a panel discussion, which was all about
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
clinical research and AI, and what basically here's the nickel version. People are using AI now. They're using AI to look up supplements, see if they're real, see if there's any real science on it, and using that to help them make purchasing decisions. This is what, and the end of this, all the panelists together, we all said, yeah, this means that if you got a brand, you got to do a study, you got to show that you've got something, because guess what? If you don't, they're going to look up, they're going to find the one that does, and that's the one they're going to use. That's happening now. That is happening today. It's progressing. So I think this is only going to be more and more and more. And soon they're just going to buy the ones that have the science and forget the rest. That's what I think.
I'm going to share some metrics on exactly that point. We just completed our perception use study, a big study. And I just looked at, what we're platform, what we're developing, and what consumers, would they use that? It was greater than 95%, guys. Okay, so it was yes overall. Okay, so this is what the consumers want. We're going to ride that wave to do that. Tim, for you, what's the future looking like, man?
I'm just waiting for Amazon or some other platform to have AI. You know how you can have it in your browser?
Yeah.
Right? I'm waiting for it to appear on Amazon or some other sites that sell dietary supplements. Type in, you say, here's my health issue, here's my health goal, and then wham, it'll put together a formula for you.
Well, actually, we're getting close to that. If you saw my AI Health Intelligence brief last Friday about AWS and what they're doing. So, and by the way, Amazon's a future enterprise customer for Nutriselect. Think about it, right? They can use this tool. They're still going to have substandard products on their platform. It's a business, but they could have a whole premium tier that are N scored, top-notch products, right? And they could have gone through our gauntlet, so to speak, and that's what they put on their platform. But guess what? That's what consumers are going to. That's going to be cool. Think about that. That's what consumers are going to buy, right?
That's right.
Once you see the difference, why would you buy something that's a commodity that looks the same on the label, but this one has the proof, right? It's a no-brainer.
Yep.
Elan.
So from my perspective, I think the future will hold the brands that are the most transparent. They're going to share the quality story. Right. They're going to share how it was grown, who it was grown by, pesticides used on it. They're going to show testing, transparent testing at every stage of the process, whether it's from the farm to the extraction facility to the final product. Because why wouldn't you? Because you're a good brand and you already do all the testing, and why wouldn't you share it? And then they'll use N-score to determine which one to buy, because eventually that'll be a standard tested, high quality transparency. But then what? So then the clinical studies will show, because you can have two products made the exact same way by the same company, and one has clinical studies, the other one doesn't. I guarantee people would buy the one that actually says it's going to work, because that's why we're here. So my view of the future is, the more knowledge, the more data shared, that'll be picked up by AI, by these types of products, and the consumers will have a better chance to get a product that actually does something rather than just something based on price or flashy ads.
You said the key word, transparency. Okay, because a lot of our industry is not transparent. Let's be honest. Okay, so and that's why Nutriselect is an independent platform. It's not a pay-for-play. So no influencer, no brand can pay and get a better N score for that. Because actually, that's what the consumers think. When I was in the survey, one of the questions was, well, you're just going to have people pay to advertise and put their products on there. Because that's the way everybody else does it today, right? So no. Transparency is really key here to demonstrate not only the scientific validity, but to build that trust. You can't build trust without transparency. That's it. Michael.
Transparency was at the top of my list for sure. I mean, can a brand explain the why? If the brand can explain the why, they're gonna develop trust, because then everything behind the why is verifiable. And I think that's another word that I want to throw out there. So verification, reproducibility, transparency, and basically, does the consumer experience match the promise of the brand? Honestly, I mean that's credibility, and
Yep.
that's the modality of the trust behind credibility. I mean, I think one builds the other for sure. So yeah, I think it's that simple. You start to get people. Listen, it's the Wild West, so to speak, right? We're still developing the rules. The town's still growing like crazy. There's a lot going on. So the people who think out of the box are the ones that are going to set the pace.
We're not as Wild West as the day of 30 years ago, the bikini models and the trade shows and
True,
all that kind of
true.
stuff. Okay.
But 10 years from now or 20 years from now, they'll
Remember
call
it
this the
well.
Wild West. Yeah.
Yeah.
10 years
But
from now,
it
there'll be
is-
robots in bikinis.
Yeah, maybe.
So look, here's my vision of, and I'm really futuristic about this. I'm going to take my phone. I'm going to tell it, hey, here's what I have in my supplement stack. Here, identify all the gaps for me, and I don't have to type a word and everything. And it's going to measure my biometrics by looking at my, and this is actually existing technology, by the way. German company just approached me about this a few months ago. Advanced wearable stuff, but only biometric scanning. There's a lot of hype out there and crap that people are trying to leverage, but no, they validated over 100 biomarkers from that. Okay, so think about, to me, I'm a Star Trek fan, so it's like, it's the scanner. This is the scanner. It's going to scan. It's going to tell you what you need, and then here's the product that can support that. Boom.
Yep.
That's where we're
Yep.
going, guys.
Couple that with sensors in your toilet and your toothbrush to let you know what you're deficient on, and
There you
there
go.
it is. Just
Yeah.
instant, and then it orders
Yeah.
the product for you.
Yeah. No joke, guys. I mean, I'm raising capital for Nutriselect. I've been doing that for months. Everybody's trying around the globe. I get approached every week by investment firms. Most of them are, some of them are within, there's a good thesis fit. They're in the health technology sector, whatever. But then some of them are real estate or crypto guys. They made their money in that. They see where it's going. It's a super cycle. That's what the investment firms are calling it. Like the Industrial Revolution, the birth of the internet, mobile computing. These things transformed every single industry, and that's where we're going with this. This is not a flash in the pan thing. And I think what's really cool is the educational factor, because I always like learning new things, right? I always have. I'm an avid learner. I want to learn new things. My wife says to me all the time, when I tell her something about something that's even trivial, she goes, "How do you know that?" It's like, because I read a lot. And to me, it's kind of it's the realization of the computer age, and you can really learn something really cool. And go read my LinkedIn post today, okay? Because it has to do with that. You've probably seen people posting on LinkedIn about M dashes, oh, that was written by AI and all that. Actually, I have a different perspective on it. It's like, okay, we're finally learning how to use proper grammar and punctuation. That's the reality, actually. You don't know what you don't know. And people are trashing it, saying, oh, this is AI slop or whatever. No, go read the Chicago manual on style. Okay, that's the authoritative source for authors. I'm a published author that you look at of how to use M dashes. So go read my fun post, a little provocative post about that, because I just wanted to trash that argument that's out there on the internet. I'm sorry, I don't usually want to do that, but I saw a post today. I won't say who it was, and I said, you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
That's funny.
But anyway, it's educational, right? We can learn from this, and we can really do that. Because what's the goal at the end of the day? We're in this industry because we want to help people. We want people to have a healthy life, be proactive in that. From our specialties or whatever we're doing, that's what we want to do.
I think there's an important aspect here that there's a lot of information traveling in social media and all the platforms that you can list. So people search for credibility in a mess, in this noisy room. How do you hear the person you want to hear? Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's why the transparency has to build the trust there, so you can rise above the noise there, and that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, it's been awesome. It's a great discussion. I think we've exhausted our topic. We could continue to talk about this probably. but I need to get back to my birthday celebration today. The family's waiting for dinner. So
Happy birthday.
And I just want to say again, for those of you who are
Thank you.
listening, if you need somebody to do clinical studies, go see Tim. If you need somebody to manufacture products, go see Michael. You need somebody to
That's
test
right.
products, you go
talk
see
to
Elan.
Elan.
These guys
Yeah.
are the best of the best. So,
Yeah,
That's
it's
it.
been a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Thank you, Bill.
Pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Likewise.
Well, all right, guys. I will take us out of here. We'll talk soon. And see you guys. See you when we see you. All right.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.